Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm feeling like a rabbit with a spotlight on him. Feels different when you've got lights shining in your eyes. Welcome to the national headquarters of the Theosophical Society in America. Many of you are regulars, but I expect there may be one or two new people here this evening. Anybody here for the first time? A couple. Welcome, and welcome regulars. I'm John Chianchosi. I'm the Director of Public Programs, and at this time I request that you turn off or at least silence your cell phones or electronic devices. This evening's presentation is being streamed live through the internet, and therefore I'd like to welcome our friends who are watching from home. The Theosophical Society promotes study, meditation, and service. We encourage open-minded inquiry into the world religions, philosophy, science, and the arts. And we have a deep respect for the unity of all life. Our goal is to help people explore the spiritual path so as to arrive at a deeper understanding regarding the wisdom of the ages. Furthermore, we believe this wisdom is not limited to any one tradition, and thus, at the Theosophical Society, we offer a wide range of programs from all the traditions. If you have not already done so, I do invite you to take one of our program catalogs, in which you'll find all the programs being offered during the remaining part of November and December of this year. Within a month or so, we'll have a new program catalog which will list all the programs that will be offered during the winter season of 2020. These programs are also listed on our website, and there you can register for those that are of particular interest to you. The Theosophical Society is a membership organization. We're always happy to welcome new members. Members do have special privileges, but everybody has the privilege of coming to all the programs and making full use of everything that we offer here. Everybody is always welcome. The advantages of being a member is that you can feel pride in being a member of the Theosophical Society and supporting this good work that we are doing, and you do get to attend the Thursday night lectures for free, as well as discounts for many of the other programs. Now, this evening I was asked to announce Giving Tuesday. Does anyone here know what Giving Tuesday means? No, well, education. So, the Theosophical Society does participate in this Giving Tuesday, and I'm making this announcement upon request from higher above. But it is a really good thing. Giving Tuesday has become a tradition in America. I don't know if it's worldwide. It possibly is. There's Giving Tuesday is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, following Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Yeah, it's too late. They should have made it the day before, before Black Friday. Thanksgiving should have been the giving day. But anyway, they chose Tuesday, and it is a global day of philanthropy. And many nonprofits around the world obviously appeal to their supporters and communities for donations or contributions on that particular day. It's always good to give and give what you can. And if you can give it on that day, you just go on our website, and there you'll see donations, and you can make a donation on that day or any other day. It's always we're always grateful. So I have fulfilled my obligation. Remember, Giving Tuesday, better than Cyber Monday, safer than Black Friday. Now, this evening, I'm very, very happy to be able to introduce Onani Carver. This is the first time that she has spoken here, although we were talking today, and I asked, had she visited previously here? And she did actually attend a program here with the Dalai Lama, which was quite a long time ago. And so she's not new to the Theosophical Society, but has not been here for quite some time. Onani leads a certification program on the fundamentals of energy medicine for women devoted to personal and social change. She earned the gold medal for emerging scientists by the International Society of Energy Medicine for her research on consciousness and biological evolution. She is one of the many interdisciplinary scientists contributing to the theory that matter emerges from consciousness, rather than the generally accepted tenet of materialist science, which states that consciousness is a random side effect of brain activity. So this is all very fascinating. And tonight she will speak on, now this is confusing, the title that we put on the program catalog is Microbiology to Cosmology, the Phases of Creation and the Next Evolution. However, the title that we have here is The Force of Humanity, Extinction or Transformation. And it's all about energy healing and energy medicine. Please join me in welcoming Onani Carver.
The force of humanity. What is humanity? What does it mean to be a human? We're not plants, we're not fungus, we're animals. And among animals, we're not insects, we're not amphibians, we're not birds, we're not fish. We're mammals. Mammals nurse their young. And the word mammal comes from mama. It's the first universal sound of all babies throughout the world. Ma, 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 ma. And many animals, newborn animals, make that same sound. Ma, ma, meow, meow. So mammals are meant to be connected and to touch. So I have a beautiful story about nursing. So I was living in the Amazon with a Quechua family, and they spoke Quechua and Spanish, but no English. I speak a little Spanish. However, I know how to contribute to community. I could sweep the floors, I can wash the dishes, I can walk the babies, help them walk through the jungle and help them fall asleep. And so this is my little godson, Milan. So Milan here has a little cold. And so as I was walking the kids and feeding the kids, I never got sick at all when I was living in the Amazon, except one time I did get pink eye. One of the best things for pink eye is actually breast milk. So when a mother is nursing, not only does she give the baby milk, but she also takes in the saliva of the baby. She runs that saliva through her immune system and builds up any antibodies that she perceives in that saliva and feeds them back to the baby. Therefore, teaching the baby's immune system how to respond in a healthy way to its own environment. Pollen, dog hair, no, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Oh, a flu virus, strep throat, oh, initiate some kind of response. So most likely I had the same kind of germs that the little baby had in my eye. So I asked, I thought it would be a normal question. Por favor, mi comadre, ¿puedo tener tu leche por mi ojo rojo? Please, my comadre, can I have some milk for my red eye? Now, I wasn't quite sure how she was going to, she said sure. I wasn't quite sure how she was going to get it into my eye. It would be fine if she just expressed it. But I didn't want her to put it into a glass. There was no hot water. I'm pretty sure the sponge was the same sponge that was there last year, and they ran a little restaurant. So I didn't think it was probably that clean. But she's a shaman, and she said, un momento. She went out into the jungle. She came back with a little leaf, and in one little fold, she folded it into a cup, and she expressed her milk into the cup. And several times a day, over a period of several days, she would put that into my eye. Now, I've done this for my own babies when they had pink eye, and it soothed them immediately. And that's what happened to me. It just was so soothing. And if you ever had an eye problem, you know how tiring that can be. So I went up to my cabana and just laid down, and it was amazing. That breast milk just seeped into my eye. It was so soothing. And this amazing thing happened. It was like a drug forced me to feel connected to these people. It was amazing. We always talk about that nursing relationship creates a sense of connection between mama and baby, right? Well, I actually got to feel that. It was incredible. So, among the mammals, what makes us human? What makes us different than all the other mammals? Our brain size. We have a very, very complex body. Our circulatory system, respiratory system, digestion, reproduction, and the brain filters all of that. We have complex speech. We're the only species to have the speech as complex as we have it. We have long childhoods. And we have grandmothers. So humans and whales are the only mammals whose the women survive past reproductive age. And that's most likely to help raise the children because the childhoods are so long. Now, all of that together allows us to plan for the future. There's no other species on the planet that plans for the future. There's animals that instinctually will plan maybe for the next season, but there's no other species of life that actually plans far ahead. We have imagination and flexible cooperation with large numbers of strangers. Just think, all of you here, that how many people you trusted. You read a magazine and you trusted that it would actually happen in this place at this time. No other species would do that. That then leads to myth and storytelling. Cultural institutions, a judicial system, banking system, food distribution systems. Again, no other species has those things. And a collective imagination. So I'm one of the many research scientists contributing to the theory that matter emerges from consciousness rather than the conventionally held tenet of materialist sciences stating consciousness is an epiphenomenon of biological evolution. Now that's an academic way of saying that all the science that is in place now, the science that we all grew up with, is materialist, reductionist science. So it starts with matter. It starts with time, space, force, gravity. And there's a general thought that consciousness is a side effect or a random mutation of biological evolution. A lot of the spiritual teachings tell us that there's God, chi, love, the life force, consciousness comes first. And there's enough scientists now that have had these spiritual experiences that are saying, wait a minute, this doesn't quite make sense. I think there's more to it. So this shift has a greater impact on human consciousness than the shift from when we went from geocentrism to heliocentrism. So you can see when people thought that the Earth was the center of the solar system, they made it work. But when they figured out, oh wait, maybe the sun is the center. Oh, it made things a lot simpler. And a lot of these questions fell into place. However, it took several hundred years for that shift to occur. People were killed, labs were destroyed, people were put in jail, they were ostracized. So whenever there's a big paradigm shift in science or in social situations, there's often, it takes quite a while for that shift to occur. So I'm going to define a couple of words. I'm using Dr. Federico Faggin's definition for consciousness. He's a colleague of mine, a mentor of mine. Dr. Faggin, he helped invent the first microprocessor for Intel, and he designed the touchpad and the touch screen. He wanted to invent a conscious computer, and because of his own spiritual experiences, he came to realize that you cannot create consciousness from matter. And that's what when he got started saying, oh no, consciousness is what creates matter. Matter emerges from consciousness. And now his foundation is completely for the study of consciousness. And he's one of the physicists that are contributing like mathematical equations and things like this. So I use his definition. Consciousness is the ability to perceive and know oneself. Creation energy, which it can also be called love, the life force, chi. Creation energy is the aware, dynamic, holistic, and irreducible extra-physical substance out of which everything that exists is made. The ultimate purpose of creation energy is to know and fulfill itself, and this urge drives the evolution of all that is. And we all know that energy. That's that energy that's within us and expands outward. It's that energy that allows the butterfly to emerge from the cocoon. It's that energy that allows the flower to blossom. Or the little chickie that was once really comfortable inside that egg, but it's meant to outgrow that eggshell. And it has to fight up against that eggshell, right? And nobody can help that chickie hatch. If we help that chickie hatch, it won't survive. It has to fight up against that in order to develop what it needs to survive outside that eggshell. Walking, the joy of a child, that energy inside us that always wants more. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. My mother was a nun before she got married. She was quite a mystic. She loved to observe human nature. My dad, who's part Ojibwe, which are the native people of the Great Lakes, he's also an automotive engineer, loved the woods. He loved to observe nature. I have a degree in environmental education, and I used to teach up in the Kettle Moraine. So when I was 19, I had a near-death experience. And throughout my 20s, although I didn't know what that was, I don't know if the phrase had even been coined yet. Later in my life, I met Raymond Moody, who had coined that phrase, and I learned what that was, that it's an actual thing. And but throughout my 20s, it was kind of an initiation that I wasn't aware was happening. In the summertime, I lived with grandmother Kiwe on a wilderness island in northern Lake Michigan. We had no running water, no electricity, no communication. We had a supply boat that came once a week if the weather was good. We cooked over fire. I was in charge of the medicine lodge. So I collected all the medicinal plants and I processed them all through the summer, year after year after year. So I could see all these different patterns of weather, humidity, precipitation, and how the plants grew and what we needed for that winter to supply people with. And then in the wintertime, I lived at Kripalu with Yogi Desai, a yoga and meditation master. So again, it was kind of internal, that connection to the internal, which is yoga and meditation, and connection to that external. On the island, this is where I was named Onani. From my vision quest, I was named Onani Gwen Kiwedananong, which means Star of the North emanates with joy. Onani means joy. So at this young age, I was told that I would be teaching about joy. Of course, at that age, I had no idea what that meant. Although they did tell me that it means you will probably not have joy in order to figure out what joy is. On this island is the largest Native American cemetery east of the Mississippi. So along with the gathering herbs, I also learned a lot of the songs, ceremonies, and stories of the ancestors and the gone before ones. And then same with in the wintertime when I was living in the ashram, I was learning an Eastern view of life, death, karma, past lives. It was just a completely different view of mainstream America. And so I had that near-death experience, and every other year I was experiencing some kind of death. And throughout this decade and a half or so, I was just coming to realize there's some other completely different level of reality. There's some other level of what's going on here. I raised 4 children. I gave birth to 2. I love parenting, and I knew I could take on a more challenging parenting situation than the average parent. And so I have 2 adopted transracial children, and I induced lactation, and I nursed them, all of them. And so there was something that I was really, really fascinated about, and I wasn't quite sure what it is. Mainstream education didn't quite give it to me, so I was always looking for different kinds of teachers. And so now, looking in the past, I can say that I have studied with the global leaders of business, medicine, technology, sexuality, and spirituality. That's Federico there at the top. 9/11 is really changed things for me because I looked and saw what was happening to the whole world and what was happening to our own country. I knew death in itself was a time for transformation for those who are left. It's a time for transformation. And it's more than just a transition. And so I thought, ooh, this is going to be a whole global transformation. And it's at that time where I knew it was time to share my gifts. So I started a mentoring practice, the Sacred Sexual Science of Joy. So the sacred is that which is very specific to you. That's what is unique to you. The sexual, yes, it includes sexuality. People who want a passionate life often want passionate sexuality, but it means more than just that. It also means just finding that life force, like in conflict. Behind conflict, there's that life force. What am I protecting and what are you protecting? And ooh, what can we create out of that? Or health, finances, raising children. Those are all ways to create something more than we can imagine, more than I might be able to all on my own. And then, of course, the science of joy. We know more and more about taking care of our bodies, taking care of our health and our minds. And so I saw that same pattern of, you know, those times in your life where you feel hopeless, helpless, dark, lonely, depressed, anxious. Of course, everybody knows those times. Everybody feels that many, many times in their life. And yet, we're so afraid to talk about it. If we do talk about it, we can lose respect. If we go to a doctor, we could be labeled mentally ill. And this was really, really curious to me because I saw it everywhere. I saw it in nature. I saw it in stock market charts. I saw it collecting plants. I saw it in my clients. And I certainly went through it in my own life. So it really was interesting to me. What is this? So after my kids grew up, I decided to go and pursue a doctorate. I was going to go to South America. I love mushrooms. I love the study of mycology because they are symbiotic. They have a beneficial, mutually beneficial relationship with another species. These are called cordyceps. They're very medicinal. They help modulate the immune system. And these mushrooms have symbiotic relationship with insects. So I thought I was going to South America to look at the indigenous uses of cordyceps, but my research got much bigger than that. So I ended up studying with different shamans, and this is a taita. Taita means father, and you can see he practices the Temescal or sweat lodge, which is very similar to the Ojibwe people of the Great Lakes. And so I was very familiar with this. They also use medicines in their sweat lodges, which we don't. And I was traveling with a girlfriend, an Ecuadorian girlfriend, and she was also an herbalist in Ecuador. And so whenever there were medicines around, plant medicines or any kind of medicines, we always wanted to learn how to make them. So we would ask the shamans or the taitas if we could learn how to make the medicines. So this is San Pedro, this is ayahuasca, this is back in the Amazon, that's my cabana. This is a dugout canoe. All the transportation was done by river. And this is part of the family that I lived with, and he's also a shaman. Traditional food. And shamanic practices were just a part of everyday life. Not every day, but when somebody got sick. And so these are my friends. You can see the little kids just, oh, there goes Dad giving my uncle a shamanic cleansing. And here I'm presenting in Medellin. I was asked to present at the 26th annual poetry festival. So Medellin, Colombia, in South America, was considered the most violent city of the entire world for quite a while. And so they came up with different ways, peaceful ways to create peace. And so this is a tradition, the poetry festival, and here I am, I'm singing the Ojibwe prayers in Ojibwe and translating them to English, and then that's my translator translating them into Spanish. And in the back there, I'm sitting with the Kogi people from Santa Marta, and so they live deep in on this mountain, and some of you might have heard about them. National Geographic did a special about them. The mountain told them that it's time to come out and tell the world that we need to take better care of the earth. Otherwise, they've been very isolated people. And just recently, the mountain told them it's time to come out. So, in my doctoral research, I compared biological evolution, cultural evolution, and spiritual transformation. So 3 days before I was done with my dissertation, this chart just popped into my head, and with these 4 phases of creation. I wrote it all down in 10 minutes. And I called my committee chair and I said, I don't need to send you 150 pages. All you need is 1 piece of paper. And of course I had to send in the whole thing. But everything got wrapped up. And that's when you know you've got a good theory, when it turns out really simple. And then I was awarded the gold medal for emerging scientists. So this is the chart, and I'll go through it a little bit. Don't worry if you can't read it. So the 4 phases is adaptation, constriction, cooperation, and integration. And integration becomes the new adaptation. So the adaptation phase is like the little chickie inside the egg, or a child growing up in a family, or maybe you're starting a new job where you just kind of adapt to the situation. You kind of look out and you just do kind of what you're told. You just go with the program, right? And that is where Darwin's natural selection takes place. It's in this phase. So Darwin knew that he was getting started in the idea of evolution. He knew, all scientists know, they don't have the end answer, that there's always more to know. And so this is where natural selection takes place, and it's survival of the fittest. So this eliminates the weak and maintains the status quo. It does not create new species. It just eliminates the weak, which is important to do. The connection is linear. The relationship is separate. So that's where this is my family, this is your family. This is my religion, that's that religion. The expression is concealing and camouflage. You don't really show who you are. You just go along with what the tribe expects or what the people around you expect. The resources appear limited. The time-based is the past, and that's what instinct is. It's based in the past. And so whenever you hear yourself saying, oh, it's not like it used to be, or it's not what I really want, that's all past experiences. And then when you know you're in the adaptation phase. And every phase is important. Every phase serves a really important purpose. For one thing, it creates a lot of stability. And the outlook is viewing what isn't. Competition. The impetus for change is crisis. You don't know you need to change until there's a crisis. Then comes constriction. And that's that phase where, again, the little chickie is like, oh, it was really comfortable here just a little while ago. Now it's feeling suffocating. And we all go through those times in our life, right? You've outgrown a job. You've outgrown your family, a religion. You've outgrown the relationship the way it has been. And it's time to grow. It's painful to stay where you are, but it's really scary to move somewhere else. And that's the constriction phase. That's where we kind of have to fight up against something. And it feels really vulnerable. We feel really isolated. There's just fragmentation. It's destabilizing. Time is at a standstill. You just don't know what's going on. You can feel really lonely or alone in this phase. Then comes cooperation, and that's symbiosis. So symbiosis, I'll just start with bacteria. So in the very, very beginning, There were simple cells. They didn't have a nucleus. They're called prokaryotes. So they were just very simple cells. And they eventually had a lot of them had predator-prey relationship. And then one day, they cooperated. Now, it's not like they decided to turn around and, hey, let's call a truce, let's cooperate. The cooperation is always forced. And I'll go into that more later. So it's a predator-prey relationship or dominant-submissive relationship, and it's forced into cooperation. The developmental process is selective advantage. Selective advantage means that it almost always works out for the bacteria and for you. Building external networks. Now the resources are shared. Time base is present. Now you can come to present time. And the impetus for change is inspiration. So just think about diet. Oh, you don't change your diet until you have a heart attack. Oh, I better eat this so I don't get a heart attack. That's prevention. Then comes inspiration. I want to eat this because it makes me feel so good. Then comes symbiogenesis. The development process is creation. There's internal and external networks. The resources feel abundant because now we're including even the non-physical resources. Love, communication, connection, listening, caring. And there's a flow. Okay, so there is in this theory, there is a creation blueprint. And I'm sure you're all going to be familiar with this. Everything I'm saying, I'm sure. It's like, yeah, I get it. It just makes sense, right? So the creation blueprint is spiral dynamics. So it's a continually expanding network of greater and greater complexity, internally and externally. Every single time there's a paradigm shift, whether it's biological, social, or within yourself, there has to be new forms of communication, transportation of resources, source of power supply must emerge to create the new structure. So look at the planet now, right? We're in a paradigm shift, and new forms of communication are emerging, transportation of resources, like we don't even use physical resources anymore. Music, photographs, information. And the new source of power supply, that's still emerging. We haven't quite gotten that yet. Symbiotic relationships by forced cooperation. Constriction always precedes creation. Matter emerges from consciousness. It's fractal. That means it's the same pattern no matter what level you look at, microscopically or cosmologically. It's all the same pattern. Convergent evolution, it's reciprocal, constant expansion of self-expression. There's an underlying knowing, and the problem is the solution. In the adaptation phase, the problem is the problem and you want to get rid of it. In the cooperation phase, the problem is where there's life force. You want to go into it. You want to uncover it. And the problem is the solution. Okay, now I'm going to apply it to biological and cultural evolution. Anybody want to take a guess of what this is a picture of? Just take a guess. The expanding universe. The internet. A brain. Yeah, those all could be true. This happens to be a speck of soil. These are the networks that are in a speck of soil. Those little dots there are pointing out the connections, if they're plant connections or fungal connections, different kinds of connections. So Lynn Margulis is an evolutionary biologist, and she's the scientist that brought symbiosis back into biology. And what she says is life did not take over the earth by combat, but by networking. Just for fun, what's this a picture of? Neural networks. What else? Fungus. Those all could be accurate. This is a mouse brain. Major transitions of life. Okay, so we're going to see this pattern. I'm just going to point out the pattern, okay? So life begins with prokaryotes. Prokaryotes, again, are these really simple cells. There's no nucleus. There's a cell wall and then a bunch of stuff in there, right? They're very, very simple. And it took quite a while, but eventually one engulfed the other and created mitochondria, created a nucleus. Now there's new complexity inside that cell and new complexity in the way it relates to its environment. So complexity within and complexity without. Then these all get together and create a microbial mat. They're multi-layered, multi-species. So more cooperation and competition is beginning to happen here. Species diversification, division of labor. So the species on the outside of this mat, they're getting better at protection. And the species on the inside might be getting better at digestion. Sexual reproduction begins, and then we start seeing multicellular organisms. So organisms that have different cells that do different jobs. So now what we had externally, now we're beginning to have internally. So you can see how things are beginning to get more and more complex internally. And as they get more complex internally, they also create new networks externally. Then we get kingdoms and speciation, vertebrates, emergence onto land, humans, and eventually culture. So constriction is built into the evolution of life to force creation, to avoid complacency. Remember, consciousness wants to express itself. The continual change of power dynamics from predator-prey to forced symbiosis. So some of the constriction that's built right in is outer space, asteroids, solar flares, planetary alignments, plate tectonics, earthquakes, volcanoes, climate change. The biotic potential is greater than the carrying. Every single species has the capacity to create more offspring than the environment can handle. Not just humans, every species has that capacity. It's built in for a purpose. Every single species toxifies its own environment for a purpose. It's built into the creation process. It forces change. Okay, now we're going to apply this to biological evolution. Okay, so this is a little diagram. Whoops. So these here are called eons. If you were to land on the Earth during an eon, it would not look like the same planet. Okay? So the Hadean is the very, very beginning. That's Hadean means hell. That's where it was volcanoes and hot and bombardment, cosmic bombardment. And yet, life started during that time. That's amazing to me. And look how long it took. We had prokaryotes, very, very simple cells. Look how long it took for the prokaryotes to figure out that they were actually building blocks. It took that long for them to start creating toxicity, predator-prey relationships. It took quite a while for them to figure out, oh, if we get together, we could create something more. Then it didn't take much longer for them to figure out that they were building blocks. And here we go. We have multicellular life, animals, move on to the land, mammals, and finally humans. So you can see the majority of the history of the Earth was just figuring out how this all works. We've had 5 mass extinctions. We are in our 6th. So this is 90% of the Earth's history. So these 5 mass extinctions only happened in the past 11% of time. We didn't have enough life on Earth to have a mass extinction. And during these mass extinctions, these are called boundary points. And you can see it in the geological rock. This one here, we lost 95% of all life on the planet. Or actually this one here, this is the dinosaurs. And when we lost all the dinosaurs, that gave way for the mammals to take over. Now we're in the Phanerozoic eon, means visible life. It's 500 million years. Begins with the Cambrian explosion. So again, this is 90% of our history, and almost all the life that we really understand is just in the last 10, 11%. So again, here's just 2 of the major extinctions, and again, those are called boundary points. And you can see it in geology, you can see it in the rock. So we're currently in the Holocene epoch. So now we're going to move into cultural evolution and the major transitions of cultural evolution. The cognitive revolution, we think, took place about 70,000 years ago. And that's when our brains got bigger and really started understanding things in a different way. We started having, like hunting, cooperative hunting and burial rituals at that time. The agricultural revolution started at the time of the last glaciers, which is about 10,000 years ago. So we've been global warming for the past 10,000 years, since the last glaciers. The scientific revolution and the industrial revolution. Again, cultural evolution follows the same blueprint. It's a change of power dynamics, a change of authority, increasing internal and external complexity. Just think of cities getting bigger and bigger, and countries having more and more communication. So there's more complexity within a country and more complexity and networking outside the country. And again, these 3 things always emerge. So, becoming aware of one's internal experience, becoming aware of consciousness, of spirituality, probably occurred accidentally, around that 70,000 years ago or so. That's probably when humans became complex enough and our brains started understanding how all this complexity works, that we started realizing that there's something going on. There's some kind of internal experience. possibly through sensory deprivation or sensory overload, like starvation, getting lost, being alone for long periods of time, seizures, near-death experiences, high fevers, intense pain, intense beauty, and the accidental ingestion of entheogens or psychedelics. And so many of you probably have had these experiences. And often this is what will wake people up that, wait, there's something more subtle going on than this concrete reality that we all live within. These people are probably the ones that became the shamans, the taitas, the medicine people, developing spiritual practices, lineages. So, chanting probably helped when you were really lonely or starving. Or maybe, starving said, hey, we could try fasting. Accidental starvation led me to this amazing awareness. And passing on the information through story, music, art, and ritual. Okay, so this is just another diagram of another one that I've showed you. So you can see this is the biological evolution. So for many, 90% of our history, there wasn't much here. And then all of a sudden, explosion. So it kind of moves out in a spiral. We have the same thing in cultural evolution. It's called spiral dynamics. So some of you are probably very familiar with this. This is a researched idea. It's used all over the world for creating different social systems, banking systems, medical systems, depending on where the people are. So like in South Africa, when they were rebuilding South Africa, they used different colors, different ideas, different concepts to help people reset their lives again, depending on what stage they were at. Now this is fascinating to me. So since 10,000 years ago, that's when agriculture started. That's when the domestication of plants and the domestication of animals started. So we had no domesticated animals 10,000 years ago. The majority of the animals on the planet were wild animals. Only 1% were humans. In 10,000 years, we have very, very few wild animals left. The majority of animals we have now are livestock that we created. 32% humans. And just think, what do you do when you see a wild animal? Do you try to exterminate it? Bats, raccoon, fox, coyote, bear. 1950 is called the Great Acceleration, where everything went up. Population, motor vehicles, telephones, energy use, great floods, everything just went up. War is the equivalent, is the constriction that we've always used for in cultural evolution. So war is the forced cooperation in cultural evolution. War has preceded every single major shift in social structure. Overall, war has created richer, safer, less violent, healthier, larger, more organized societies. 10,000 years ago, it was 90% likelihood you would die a violent death. Today, worldwide, it's about 2%. Death by violence has dropped 90% in 10,000 years. Societies are so effective and weapons are so destructive. Has war put itself out of business? We hope so, but we don't know that yet. We haven't crossed that threshold yet. We still put a lot of time and money and resources into military and war and that feeling that we have to protect ourselves. And maybe we don't need that anymore. No other species has decreased its level of violence and increased its level of empathy to this degree. But there's two things that have happened in the last 100 years that has really changed human consciousness. One of it is nuclear war. Now we can really truly understand that if I kill you, I kill me. The other thing that happened is outer space. We have a picture of seeing the Earth from a distance. What is this a picture of? Take a guess. Dust? Very good. That's pretty close. Anything else? Stardust. That's right. This is your family. This is the most complex picture of the star family that we live within, taken by the Gaia telescope. 20 years ago, we thought planets were very, very rare. When a star has planets revolving around it, it's called a sun. We thought suns were very rare. Only in the last 20 years do we now know that the majority of stars are suns. The majority of stars have planets on them. There are a lot more planets. This is brand new information for us. We have a lot more planets around us than we ever realized. So how does humanity serve the expression of consciousness? Life beginning on a planet might not be uncommon. We're looking at Venus, we're looking at Mars, and it looks as if it's very likely that life began on those planets. Maintaining life might be uncommon. Is intelligence a short-lived cosmic force like an asteroid or a planetary property of evolution? We don't know. Human impact is a possible time division. Maybe it's a boundary event, right? Like that asteroid that came and eliminated the dinosaurs. That's a boundary event in between, that causes extinctions. Is humanity a boundary event? A short-lived 10,000-year boundary event? Is it an epoch? So geologists, mainstream geologists, are actually talking about this. Are we entering a new epoch? The Anthropocene epoch, significant human impact. Or are we entering a new eon? Remember, an eon is when you land on the planet, it looks completely different. Just think about Chicago. Chicago looks completely different than it did in the previous eon. Maybe we're entering the age of wisdom. Is intelligence a fundamentally changed the nature of the planet? Does consciousness need intelligence? We don't know yet. Never before has a geological force been aware of its existence. This is brand new. The majority of people on the planet can't be aware of this. The majority of people on the planet are in survival consciousness. They can't be ahead of the game. The majority of people in industrialized countries are still in this physical day-to-day world, right? So it's all of you and me. We are the ones who are aware that we're in this marked period of change on the planet. So that gives us a special responsibility. 4 global problems must be solved, all 4 of them, not 3 of them. All 4 have to be changed. The inequality, access to safety and resources, unsustainable resource use, climate change, and nuclear risk. So let's go back to the first question. What makes us human? Our myths, our cultural institutions. Time for a new story. The new story is what we already know. But just like with the telescopes and the heliocentric versus the geocentric, when people started saying maybe the sun is the center, they were ostracized, they were killed, they were jailed. Their labs were destroyed. The same thing has happened to practitioners of energy medicine, spiritual teachers. The same thing kind of is happening, has been happening. But it's safe now. We can talk. Everybody knows this stuff. Everybody. Nobody argues with this anymore. Well, some people do. But it's safe. So based on historical evidence of biological and cultural evolution, all the elements are in place for a global paradigm shift. Creation follows an identifiable, methodical process. Constriction before expansion is normal and necessary. The pain and constriction and toxicity experienced throughout the planet is the natural unfolding of a paradigm shift. All the social systems in place now, economic, judicial, medical, food, sexuality, religious, are based in survival, adaptation, consciousness. And what happens when you outgrow a paradigm shift? Ooh, there's pain. It's scary to change. It's painful to stay where you are. But it's scary to move to where you have to go. So if we are the ones who know we want the change, we can't be afraid of it. We're the ones who have to talk confidently about this. We're the ones that have to be the visionaries that say, come on, let's go. There really is a different way. But if we're fighting up against it, then we're afraid of our own vision. Humanity is moving from survival consciousness to inspired consciousness. Dr. Marshall Goldsmith is a global business coach who I worked with, and he comes from a Buddhist perspective. And he tells the CEOs of the world's largest corporations, quit being a jerk. That's his motto. What got us here won't get us there. So we did it. What got us here, we're out of survival consciousness. We did it. So we can actually be thankful for that. But now it's time to change. But when the little chickie comes out of that eggshell, the little chickie doesn't turn around and get mad at the eggshell. The little chickie moves on. When your foot outgrows your shoe, you don't get mad at your foot, you don't get mad at your shoe. You get a new pair of shoes. So the physical world shows us how the non-physical works. As the nature of the creation process reveals, matter is created from consciousness. Conflict, health issues, finances are guidance towards your desire. That's the life force. That's creation energy. It's telling you something. Go into it. To contribute to a paradigm shift of inspiration, an internal connection to creation energy must be at the core of one's personal and professional practice. We are the pioneers of consciousness becoming conscious. We are the leaders, we are the teachers, we are the role models. So we are the ones who have to show the joy and the play and the fun that's available when you connect to that other power source. Fighting, judging, resisting, criticizing is a reflection of your own fear. of your own self-expression expression and expansion. So, I teach the fundamentals of energy medicine. I'm having a workshop here on Saturday. I'd love for you to join us, and that'll be more personal. We'll have a lot of conversation, we can take a lot of questions, and we'll look at how do I actually change the power dynamics of my own life? How do I even become aware if I'm in a dominant or a submissive state? How do I even become aware of that? And how do I play with it? How do I change that? The problem is the solution. It's where the life force is ready to expand. Get excited when you're in conflict, right? Or when you have a health problem, financial problems. Because none of the systems work. We've outgrown all those systems. And so a lot of the financial problems, the medical problems, are not just you not being all that you can be, but every choice you make is right on this side and wrong on that side, right? I mean, it's hard to make any decision, like drinking water. Do I drink it out of plastic? Do I drink it out of the faucet? Do I get a filter? I mean, everything has run its course. Everything needs to change. Developing fluidity of awareness, action with knowing. So that submissive state, you know. That dominant state is action, but action without knowing is tyrannical. But knowing without action is powerless. For the first time in history, you can actually heal your past trauma. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, they didn't know what that was. Every species on this planet are immigrants. Not just Americans, not just humans. They're immigrants, they're native, they were forced here, they were slaves. And it takes stamina to be joyful. It takes a lot of stamina. So you have to take care of your body. And again, scientifically, so I have the 7 simples. Very simple things, very, very simple things. And yet, it takes a lot of mindfulness. Getting sun, moving, drinking water, good sleep, things like that. Be the role model. Living on the edge of fear is the edge of mystery. And you can play in it. A lot of spiritually oriented people, a lot of creative people, we live on that edge. We have to get really, really comfortable living on that edge of fear, mystery. Especially if we're going to be the role models. So, please write me, keep in touch. Thank you. And I'd love to hear any, thank you.
Thank you, Onani. And you do have plenty of time for questions. I do ask that you raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, because we wish to record the question as well as the answer. So just raise your hand and I'll bring you the microphone. Whether it's a question or a comment, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd love to hear any feedback, any comments, what were some of your favorite things you heard?
Well, I just have a question, and I don't know the answer, but sapienza, wisdom, you need to use your right side of the brain to get that. And we do, we try. But then you also need some of the ancestral forces, let's say, you claim to those forces of nature or on forces of the universe to accomplish something. Let's say October 1st, I was with my son. My son was very sick, and he was dying. So I was very mad, and I am calling and saying, why don't you help?
Yeah.
Then I remember what the shamans always talk and say, so I just started doing the same thing, and I started cleaning my son, and next day he was walking. So are we in the future so much, or are we in the past? Or we need both of them. We need the future to keep us going in evolution, but there is a base that
Exactly.
we cannot let go. We still need gods, we still need help.
Exactly. Yeah.
We cannot do it alone.
Exactly. Right. We don't do it alone. We don't do it alone. Creation always moves forward. Creation only moves forward. So a lot of people, wish for the old days, or we need to get back to these times, or I lost my center, things like that. But creation only moves forward. However, there is some basic underlying principles that are like the creation blueprint, that are just always, it's just part of how creation, at least on this planet, from what we understand today, that they always apply.
How do you envision this new inspired consciousness manifesting?
I don't, because it's the mystery. Because I have no idea. All I know is to take that next leap into the unknown, which can be scary, which can be fearful, that vulnerable step. But
What is it?
well, again, it's different. It's different. That's the sacred aspect. That's different for every single person, and yet there is a collective step that all of humanity needs to take forward if we are going to survive. And what is it? It's part of it is this change, the paradigm shift. We've got a huge disparity of people who have access to resources and people who don't have access to resources. We have plenty of resources to feed everybody. Everybody can be safe on the planet, but because of this disparity, it's not happening. And this disparity happens right before a paradigm shift, whether it's bacteria, whether it's small social systems, like right during the print, right after the printing press, disparities and different factions form. So everything that's happening on the planet is what happens, even in a pond. And so there might be a really toxic bacteria that comes into the pond, and there might be a big fight among the primary bacteria. But over on the edges, there's all this other bacteria doing what's called biological computation. And they're saying, oh, I wonder if this works. I wonder if this works. I wonder if this works. And all the toxic waste that's being produced there, these little bacteria, I'm like, oh my gosh, we need that. Oftentimes, the waste of the previous generation becomes the fuel for the next one. So what's going to come next? I have no idea. Okay.
And I hope that I phrased this correctly, but I got the sense that through some of the graphs, this massive expansion in such a very short time,
Yes.
this technological advancement, the way that we're evolving technologically,
Yeah.
greatly is greatly kind of racing forward quicker than our biological
That's
evolution,
accurate. That's accurate. Yeah.
which to me would lean towards a mass extinction of humanity. That comes across quite nihilistic, but my sense is that that would be that shift to the next, whether that's the next eon or whatever, the next shift is the extinction of mankind and evolution through that.
That's possible. Again, we don't know. And it's true. But you saw that map where time does speed up. I mean, it took, quite a while for that very simple prokaryote to learn how to be a building block and become a complex eukaryote. And it didn't take much longer for them to figure out how to become multicellular. And then more and more diversification and speciation, right? And it just keeps speeding up. And yeah, now things are happening really fast. Is that an aspect of consciousness? We don't know yet. So technology is either, it's either, maybe this planet will become so polluted that, they are figuring out how to live on Mars. All the global warming that's happening here, if we could warm Mars, just like that, they say that we might be able to live on the planet within 100 years, that we could create an atmosphere on Mars within 100 years. So we don't, maybe the toxicity and the overpopulation is going to take us to places beyond our belief and beyond what we think we should do. But that's been true of science all along. People were afraid to have town clocks. No, only God tells time. People don't tell time. They were afraid to have a town clock. So we're always afraid of our own inspiration. And so collectively, yeah, it's scary. But it's painful to stay where we are. We can't stay where we are. So we have to jump into the mystery.
Thanks again for this presentation tonight. But early on when I joined the Theosophical Society in the 70s, I learned a prayer, and a part of it that keeps re-entering my head of late is that we live in this reality in the infinite. And I think this applies to what we're talking about here, because I think most of us are worried about our own, limitations or, future or whatever, or lack thereof, especially for our children or grandchildren. And when I keep thinking about that prayer and those lines, we live in this reality in infinite, maybe you're right. Maybe we don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. Consciousness will continue. And if, just like the dinosaurs, when they were extinct, it gave rise to humanity. So if we're extinct, we don't know what that will give rise to. But I think it'd be fun to try. Just see. I think it would be really fun to keep trying. I love playing with the life force. Any favorite things that you heard? Anything sound familiar?
Wait for the microphone.
Okay, we'll get you next, Pat.
I loved the idea that constriction is built into our reality
Yes.
with the astrological forces and all the others that you named. I hadn't thought of it that way. but
Exactly.
I'd learned from the consciousness called Abraham that
Yes, I'm familiar.
contrast drives evolution and creation, but I hadn't thought that these physical forces also are part of that.
The
constriction.
physical forces are manifest from consciousness, so of course they're going to follow the same pattern.
All I said was that I really liked the idea that the problem is the solution.
I know.
Oftentimes, I feel I get stuck in the problem and trying to, I don't even know what I'm trying to do. You know, the problem is I want to stop it.
Or get rid of
How do I
it, or,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of turning around and saying, oh, it's
Yeah.
guidance.
And I
Right.
feel like for my daily reality of living with a 4-year-old, there's a lot of that.
Uh-huh, yes.
They're simple, but if you can, as you would, bring joy to it somehow or change it in a magical way, the solution.
Yeah, thank you. Any other favorite frames? Anything that touched you?
You waited.
It's not necessarily a favorite thing. I had the same question about what's next.
Yeah.
And I understand you don't know. But from your perspective, not knowing what's next, what kinds of steps or leaps or actions or thoughts are you putting out into the world or in your
This is what I'm putting out into the world. And then in my classes and working with both individuals and groups. Well, working with individuals, again, I help people connect to their own knowing and to their desire. Their desire is what leads them to the next step. And yet we get so many different messages from society of, no, you shouldn't desire that. That shouldn't be right. And shame and all these different feelings and past trauma and things like that. And yet in that quiet space, in that quiet spot, you can connect to this deeper knowing. And it's a very subtle energy, and that's what energy medicine is. It's connecting to that really subtle energy that everybody has within them. And that's what leads all of us to that next step of desire, that next step of knowing. So when I have clients come in, should I get married? Should I get divorced? Am I gay? Am I straight? You know, all kinds of, should I quit my job? Should I? And they know. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer, but they know the answer. And so I help guide them to the next step. That's all, just that next step.
I do think it's pretty exciting that you made the connection between that even on a just a basic cellular level. We go through the same processes.
Yeah,
That a molecule, that these are the same processes that we're both attempting. These same
Exactly.
cycles
exactly.
apply not only to whatever we consider a higher life form, but also apply to the simplest life form. I think that's really an exciting parallel.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the way you put everything together.
Thank you.
I like the table, the chart that you showed. I think a lot of the truth in the universe can be found by assimilating things together like that. I like
Yeah.
that you studied culture, biology, cosmology, and
Microbiology.
yeah, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
I thought it is okay. I thought it was really cool when you were talking about the organisms making microcalculations
Uh-huh.
and figuring out that they needed the toxin.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me of certain things that I've heard about, like a bacteria that started eating the Titanic,
Oh, right, exactly.
certain bacteria they found that
Right, and
started eating plastic.
exactly, and they're finding fungus that eat oil spills and plastic, and exactly. So in the very beginning, there's a couple of bacteria. Well, some of the original bacteria, they were just living life, and they were creating so much toxic gas that they almost extincted themselves. But again, over on the side of the pond, there's the other bacteria doing their biological computation. What about this? What about this? What about this? And they said, we can use that. That toxic gas was oxygen. And what the bacteria created was the very first animal cell that used the oxygen. So you're all made from toxic gas.
One last comment.
I think your presentation was great. It's very complex, but I think it was very easy to understand.
I don't think it's very complex, but not complicated, really.
And also, you mentioned you had a near-death experience. Can you please tell us about it?
Oh, we don't have time, but I would, I would love to. Yeah. Have you had a near-death experience? No. Okay. Are you sure? You're nodding. So the person behind you, you have. Ah, yeah. The Vision Quest. Yeah. Very good.
Well, maybe we'll make that another talk.
Another talk, yes. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Onani. As Onani already mentioned, she is doing a workshop on Saturday, this Saturday afternoon from 1 to 4 p.m. The workshop is on working with creation energy, and it'll be more interactive and experiential, and I'm sure be able to explore in greater depth many of these concepts that she's broached this evening. If you would like to participate in the workshop, would really appreciate it if you could decide by tomorrow, and please do register, pre-register. Just go on our website and look under events, and you'll see the link for this particular event, working with creation energy. We've got plenty of room. I'd really like to have some more registration, so please consider coming for that. Thursday next week, we will have Richard Smalley with us, who is a regular speaker here, quite a prolific author, and he will be speaking on A Theology of Love, which is a talk based on his newly released book, A Theology of Love, Reimagining Christianity Through a Course in Miracles. And we will be doing, the books will be available here, and he'll be doing a book signing event as well. That's Thursday next week.